For 3 years, he pursued the Ice Queen. The captain tried to charm her 999 times, and she'd remained utterly untouchable. He was all long legs, broad shoulders, and a lean waist, but she wouldn't even give him a second glance. After the last rejection, he snatched the phone from the desk and dialed a number he hadn't called in 3 years. "I'll marry the girl from Havenwood." Silence stretched on the other end before Arthur Miller's voice came through, laced with disbelief. "Are you serious? Take it or leave it." "No, no, no." His father's voice cracked with excitement. I can't believe it. This is wonderful. You finally come to your senses. Dad will arrange the wedding immediately. Make sure it's a grand affair. Isn't this what you wanted?" Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in his eyes. "Don't bother with the wedding arrangements. You're not invited, and don't you dare bring your precious first love and her son anywhere near me. Give me $100,000 by the end of the summer. I'll take it with me. Are you trying to cut ties with me?" Arthur's voice dropped, incredulous. "Ethan, I'm still your father." "Father, you think you deserve that title?" Ethan scoffed. "Just remember to send the money. Otherwise, the wedding's off." He hung up. He knew his father desperately needed him for this marriage alliance in the small town, so he'd agree to any condition. Ethan looked up, meeting his own gaze in the mirror, seeing the faint resemblance to his mother. His mother had been dead for 10 years, and he still couldn't forget the way Arthur Miller had practically danced on her grave to welcome his new family. It was 1970. He had just turned 10. His mother was barely in the ground when Arthur brought home his old flame and her son, Samuel Evans. That day, Samuel, dressed in a brand new blue and white striped shirt, had timidly called him brother. Ethan had responded by grabbing the nearest heavy object, an incense burner, and cracking it over Arthur's forehead. He was shipped off to Europe that very night. Over the years, he let his father spoil his mistress and her son back in the States, while he, in retaliation, burned through his father's money abroad, living a life of excess and debauchery until 3 years ago when an urgent call from Arthur had summoned him back. There was a new government initiative. Something about fostering connections between urban centers and rural communities. His father, besotted with his old flame, naturally doted on Samuel, his stepson. He couldn't bear for Samuel to marry someone he didn't love or be inconvenienced by this rural assignment, so he decided to send Ethan, his biological son, to the sticks instead. Ethan had smashed everything he could in the Miller mansion, including his father's favorite porcelain vase. Arthur, trembling with rage, had him practically hogtied and delivered to Captain Rachel Holloway's National Guard training base that same night, forcing him to live, eat, and train with her. "Rachel, my dear, do an old friend a favor. Help me. Knock some sense into this ungrateful son of mine." Rachel Holloway was the daughter of his father's old friend, young to be a captain. She was notoriously known as the Ice Queen. The woman was stunning, one in a million, with long, lean legs, a high-bridged nose, and a uniform that accentuated her broad shoulders and narrow waist. Her aura was as cold as a blizzard on a mountaintop. Obligated to Arthur, her attitude towards Ethan was even stricter than towards her own subordinates. The very first day, she'd made him do drills until he dropped. A rich kid like him had never endured such hardship. His feet had swollen. That night, he'd cursed her out in his room for hours. But the next morning, a tube of muscle rub had appeared. On his nightstand, Rachel Holloway was as cold as ice. Yet somehow, when he'd had a stomachache in the middle of the night and the infirmary was locked, she climbed through a window to get him medicine. When he failed his shooting assessment, she'd kept him training until dawn, finally steadying his wrist and murmuring, "Aim carefully before you pull the trigger." When he'd had a fever and was delirious, she'd coolly remarked that he was a grown man acting like a baby, yet she'd stayed up all night watching over him. Ethan's heart, adrift for so many years, had slowly, unexpectedly, begun to heal. In this harsh environment, he'd fallen for Rachel Holloway, but everyone said Captain Holloway. Only passion was serving her country. She had no time for romance. He hadn't believed it. Everyone had feelings and desires. Was she pretending to be so stoic? So he'd started trying to charm her in every way imaginable. On rainy days, he'd forget his umbrella, showing up before her drenched. She'd hand him a jacket without a flicker of expression, saying, "Put this on." On his birthday, he prepared a box full of gifts, but she'd picked up the intercom, and security sent someone to dispose of these items. During training, he'd fainted from heatstroke, hoping to lean on her shoulder, but she'd sidestepped him and called for a medic. Stretcher. Rachel Holloway truly seemed to be made of ice, but she was different with Samuel Evans. When Samuel spilled coffee on her map, she merely said softly, "Careful, it's hot." The hideous red string bracelet Samuel had made for her, she'd worn for 3 years. Samuel could even barge into her office during a meeting, and she'd only glance at him with a hint of exasperation before returning to her files. Everyone knew why. During a mission, years ago, she'd been caught in an avalanche. Samuel, the accompanying medic, had searched for her in the frozen wilderness for 3 days and 3 nights, carrying her back from the brink of death, a life debt she'd never forget. And what was he, Just some rich kid his father had dumped on her to be reformed, the exact type of person she despised. Last night, he'd seen Samuel leaving her office, a satisfied smirk on his face. He didn't dare imagine what had happened. Ethan Miller might be reckless, but he wasn't desperate enough to compete with Samuel Evans for a woman getting married. In some backwater town might be for the best. At least there'd be no Rachel Holloway, no Samuel Evans, none of this crap. That made his chest ache. Ethan took a deep breath, grabbed a change of clothes, and headed to the communal showers. Wouldn't you know it, he turned the faucet and no water. He glanced at his watch. Rachel should still be on the training field. She wouldn't be back for a while. He dragged out a large plastic tub, filled it with cold water from the tap in his small living area, then added hot water he'd heated. The temperature was just right. He sank into it. He'd been soaking for less than 5 minutes when he suddenly heard Rachel's voice outside, talking to a few of her subordinates. He froze. The doorknob was turning. Rachel suddenly snapped. "Don't, come in." The door slammed shut. He heard muffled voices from outside. "What's wrong?" "I think Mr. Miller's in there taking a bath. I just got a peek. But man, he's built. If I married a guy like Ethan Miller, wow, you dream on." "Quiet." Rachel's voice was laced with anger. "Another word of gossip and you're all doing 20 extra clicks. Dismissed." Footsteps scattered hastily. Ethan leisurely dried himself and got dressed when he opened the door. Rachel was standing in the shadows of the hallway, her eyes dangerously cold. "Who told you to bathe in here?" "Ethan Miller." "Are you so shameless you'd stoop to this just to get my attention?" Ethan looked up at her. "I wasn't trying to get your attention, and I didn't mean anything by it. The communal showers didn't mean anything. Weren't you the one openly soaking in your living space? Weren't you the one stark naked?" She advanced on him, step by step, the sarcasm in her eyes like daggers. "Weren't you the one who insisted on sleeping in my quarters during the thunderstorm? Weren't you the one who accidentally fell into my arms during training?" "Ethan Miller, I'll say this one last time, I'm not interested in you. Your father dumped you here. Once this reform period is over, you and I will have nothing more to do with each other." Her words were like a dull knife, slowly twisting in his chest. In 3 years, he'd heard her say similar things countless times, yet each instance still left him breathless with pain. To the track, she glanced at her wristwatch. 3 miles. Recite regulations while you run. Now, immediately. He bit down hard on his lower lip, the taste of blood spreading in his mouth. For a split second, he almost blurted it out. "I'm not interested in you anymore either. I'm getting married soon, starting a family. I'll be out of your sight for good." But how would she react? He took a deep breath, said nothing, and turned away, his boots thudding heavily. The moonlight on the track was stark and pale. Ethan ran, shouting at the top of his lungs. First, obedience to orders is paramount. Second, strict adherence to discipline. Windows in the barracks lit up one by one. Heads poked out. Mr. Miller getting punished again. Tisk. With a handsome face like that, he could have anyone. Why chase after Captain Holloway, who's clearly not interested in men? Yeah, if Captain Holloway were to date anyone, it would be Dr. Evans, right? He saved her life, after all. I've never seen her show special treatment to anyone but Dr. Evans. The hushed comments pricked his ears like needles. He ran faster, his voice growing louder. Third, fear no sacrifice. Fourth, be brave and unyielding. Sweat streamed into his eyes, stinging. He swiped at his face, unsure if it was sweat or tears. 10th, the world suddenly spun. He staggered, his forehead slamming hard onto the ground. A flash of crimson filled his vision. Captain Holloway. Mr. Miller fainted. Someone exclaimed, "Leave him." Her voice was as cold as ice. Continued training. Ethan forced himself up, blood from his forehead trickling down his brow bone, sticky and cold. He wiped it with his hand, his palm came away scarlet. "I don't need you to care about me either." His voice trembled, but he stubbornly straightened his body. Rachel Holloway stood a short distance away, posture ramrod straight, her expression calm without a flicker of emotion. He laughed, a laugh that made his eyes burn, then turned and continued running. First, obedience to orders is paramount. Second, strict adherence to discipline. Blood mixed with sweat blurred his vision. He didn't know how long he ran or how many times he recited the rules. He only knew his throat tasted of blood and his legs felt like lead, each step like treading on knives. Never betray. The last word barely out. His vision went black and he collapsed completely. Dimly he felt someone helping him up. He managed to pry his eyes open. Rachel Holloway's hand was in his line of sight. "Didn't you say you wouldn't care about me?" Rachel didn't stop walking, her voice firm. "As long as you're under my command, I'm responsible for your safety." So that was it. He suddenly laughed, a laugh that made his chest ache. All those nights she climbed through windows to get him medicine. Those nights she'd watched over his fever. Those seemingly casual acts of concernal just responsibility. "Don't worry." His voice grew fainter. "I'll be gone soon," he thought. He heard Rachel ask, "What do you mean?" but he couldn't hold on any longer and passed out completely. When he woke up again, Ethan found himself lying on his bunk in the barracks, the wound on his forehead bandaged. He touched the gauze. His fingertips were cold. The door opened softly, and Samuel Evans walked in, carrying a medical tray, a gentle, almost weak smile on his face. "Ethan, you're awake." Ethan's expression turned cold instantly. "I'll let you in. Rachel asked me to come." Samuel's voice was smooth, almost melodic. "She said you were hurt and asked me to bandage you up." He paused, then added, "Ethan, why are you always so careless in getting hurt? You don't really think this will make Rachel pay more attention to you, do you? Too bad for you." His smile widened. "Your father is mine, your home is mine, and Rachel, she's mine too." Ethan stared at him coldly. "You're the son of a home. Who gave you the right to provoke me? Get out." Samuel didn't get angry. Instead, his smile grew wider. "Yes, I'm the son of the other woman, but this son of the other woman has everything." He tilted his head, his eyes filled with pity. "And you, the son of the rightful wife, have nothing. It's quite amusing, isn't it?" As he spoke, he took a small bottle of medicine from his pocket and gently placed it by the bed. "Here's the medicine. Remember to apply it later." Ethan shot out his hand, but Samuel, as if anticipating it, stepped back smoothly, grabbing the medicine bottle from the nightstand. His smile was innocent. "Are you going to tell me to get out again, Ethan?" And then he smashed the bottle. He blinked, his tone deceptively naive. "In that case, let me help you." Before the words were out, he snatched the bottle and slammed it violently onto the floor amidst the sound of shattering glass. He staggered back, collapsing among the shards. The door burst open, and Rachel Holloway strode in. The first thing she saw was Samuel sitting amidst the broken glass, his knee bleeding, while Ethan leaned against the headboard, watching him with a blank expression. "Explain." Rachel's voice was like ice. Ethan closed his eyes. He remembered the last time Samuel had framed him like this. He explained, but what had gotten him? Rachel only ever believed Samuel, so this time he couldn't even be bothered to explain. "Didn't you see everything?" He looked up, a sarcastic smile playing on his lips. "What else is there to explain?" Rachel's eyes grew colder. "Ethan Miller, you're incorrigible," she said frigidly. "Your punishment is Rachel." Samuel quickly grabbed her sleeve. "Ethan's still injured. Don't punish him." Rachel frowned. Samuel gently tugged her arm again, his voice pleading. "Let go. Just make him write an apology report." "Okay." Rachel glanced at him and finally relented. "Fine." Ethan watched this scene, his heart feeling like it was being squeezed mercilessly. So even someone like Rachel Holloway would make exceptions for Samuel Evans. He suddenly laughed. "Captain Holloway, you have terrible taste." Rachel's gaze sharpened. "What do you mean?" He wanted to say she was blind for falling for someone like Samuel, but before he could speak, Samuel let out a small ouch and clutched his knee. Frowning, Rachel, as expected, immediately forgot her inquiry and rushed to support him. "What's wrong?" "My knee hurts." He bit his lip, looking aggrieved. Ethan watched coldly as Rachel helped Samuel leave, tossing over her shoulder before she left. "Get that report to me when it's done." The door was left ajar. Ethan sat at the desk, writing the apology. If he glanced up, he could see Rachel in the hallway, half kneeling, tending to Samuel's knee. Her movements were so gentle, her brows slightly furrowed as if she were handling something incredibly fragile. So she could make that expression too. Ethan pulled his gaze back, the tip of his pen scoring a harsh line across the paper. Finished. When Ethan handed over the report, they had just finished with the first aid. Rachel took the report, skimmed it, her face changing abruptly. "What is this you've written?" "What do you mean?" "You were wrong. Wrong for not catching Samuel when he pretended to fall, wrong for not pressing his hand into the shards so he'd be in too much pain to ever try such a pathetic stunt again." Ethan met her gaze calmly. "That's just the truth of it." A vein throbbed at Rachel's temple. She looked about to explode. "Rachel," Samuel grabbed her arm. "Ethan's just been injured. Don't be angry." Rachel's eyes were sharp, about to speak, but Samuel tugged her again. "Rachel, let it go." He turned to Ethan, smiling gently. "Ethan, we're going for a picnic at the state park later, by the lake. Why don't you come with us?" Ethan replied, not interested, but Samuel had already linked his arm through Ethan's affectionately. "Come on, Ethan. Don't be mad. I'll help you." Ethan wanted to shake him off, but Rachel was standing right there, her eyes fixed on him with a warning. He suddenly felt very tired. In the end, Ethan was dragged along. Sitting in the back seat, watching Samuel expertly open the front passenger door for Rachel, he finally understood why Samuel had insisted he come. The guy wanted him to witness it firsthand of Rachel's special treatment for Samuel. When the car started, Samuel accidentally brushed Rachel's hand as she shifted gears. She didn't pull away. The instant their fingertips touched, Ethan remembered last month during training when he'd brushed her hand. She'd immediately wiped it 3 times with an antiseptic wipe. "Rachel, try this." Samuel broke off a piece of brownie, his fingertips dusted with powdered sugar. and offered it toward her mouth, accidentally smudging a button on her uniform. Normally, if someone dirtied Rachel's uniform, she'd give them a cold lecture for half an hour, but now, as Samuel exclaimed and tried to wipe it off, she merely looked down, letting him fuss. It was an indulgence he'd never seen from her. When the picnic blanket was spread, Samuel suddenly exclaimed, "I forgot my water bottle." Rachel immediately handed him hers. Ethan stared at the water bottle. Last time he'd accidentally picked it up, she'd snatched it back, her face cold, saying, "I'm a bit of a jerk." But now, after Samuel drank from it, he deliberately left a little. "Rachel, thanks, here you go." She actually took it back and drank from it. All day, Rachel's attention was solely on Samuel. Ethan was like an invisible man, silently trailing behind them, watching all their intimate interactions, until Samuel raised his smartphone, smiling. "Rachel, let's take a selfie." Rachel never took photos, but this time she surprisingly didn't refuse. With no one else to ask, she handed the phone directly to Ethan. "You take it." Ethan took the phone, looking at them through the lens. Rachel stood behind Samuel, one hand lightly resting on his waist as if ready to protect him at any moment. He pressed the shutter button. When he handed the phone back, she glanced at him, her brows slightly furrowed, seemingly a little surprised. As he would have thrown a fit, insisted on squeezing into the picture, or deliberately taken a blurry shot. But today he did nothing. In fact, from beginning to end, he hadn't moved an inch closer to her. She stared at him, as if she wanted to say something, but Samuel suddenly interjected with a smile. "Should I take one of you too? Ethan's always liked you. It would be a good memento." Rachel's face turned cold instantly. "Unnecessary." She looked at Ethan, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I will never like him." Ethan tugged at the corner of his mouth. Funny, he didn't like her anymore either. Just then, the sky suddenly darkened, and large raindrops began to fall. Rachel tossed her jacket to Samuel to shield him from the rain, her tone cool. "You two, wait here. I'll go get the car." After she strode off, Samuel's demeanor changed instantly, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "See that, Ethan? No matter how much you try to woo her, she only has eyes for me." Ethan couldn't be bothered with him. He turned to leave, but then, he heard Samuel scream. A snake darted out from the grass and bit Samuel viciously on the ankle. Samuel thrashed his leg wildly, actually flinging the snake towards Ethan. Ethan had no time to dodge. A sharp pain shot through his calf. His vision went black, and he fainted. When he regained consciousness, Ethan found himself on a stretcher, the urgent voice of a doctor in his ear. "Two men bitten by a venomous snake, but the bite locations are different. Mr. Evans's is more severe. The venom is already spread, but the hospital is out of antivenom." Rachel's voice was calm and decisive. "I have some in my quarters. I've already sent someone to get it." Soon, one of her subordinates ran up, panting but holding only one vial of antivenom. "Captain, there's only one dose left. Who do we save first?" The air instantly froze. Rachel Holloway remained silent for a long time, so long that Ethan's consciousness began to blur again. Finally, she spoke. "Save Samuel first." The doctor froze. "Captain Holloway, this is a matter of life and death. Mr. Miller's condition can wait a bit longer." But Mr. Evans' Rachel's voice was icy. "I said, save Samuel first." Ethan laughed until tears streamed down his face. Then he completely lost consciousness. He wasn't afraid of death, he was just afraid of his life ending like this. In the last moments before his consciousness faded, he vaguely remembered many things. His mother's early death, his father, who only had eyes for his mistress's son. When he was studying abroad, he'd been so lonely he couldn't sleep night after night. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of ending it all, but those people weren't dead yet. Why should he die? Later, when he met Rachel Holloway, the only thing he wanted to do was to tear off her cold mask, to make her indifferent eyes reflect only his image. She wasn't interested in him. That was fine. He could love, and he could let go. He still had so much he hadn't done, so much more of a better life to live. Even if he was being forced to marry in some remote town, he believed he could still make a good life for himself. So he didn't want to die, but it seemed he no longer had a choice. When he woke up again, he was in a hospital. A doctor was changing his dressing. Seeing him open his eyes, she breathed a sigh of relief. "You're finally awake. I'm not dead." His voice was a close call. The doctor said, still shaken. Luckily, another batch of antivenom was rerouted to the hospital just in time. Otherwise, it would have been really dangerous. Ethan managed a weak smile. "What about Samuel Evans?" The doctor, thinking he was concerned, smiled. "He's fine. His injury wasn't that serious to begin with, and Captain Holloway has been taking care of him." As she changed his dressing, she chatted on about how well Rachel had been treating Samuel, personally, feeding him water, staying up all night with him, even putting her military calls on hold. Ethan listened calmly, a strange lack of emotion in his heart. It was odd. He wasn't sad anymore. "The venom is cleared. You could be discharged after another day or two of observation," the doctor finally said. Ethan nodded. That same evening, he checked himself out of the hospital. Back at his barracks, he began to pack his things, clothes, his journal, the pocket watch his mother had left him. One by one they went into his suitcase. Halfway through packing, the door was suddenly thrown open. Ethan turned, stunned. Rachel Holloway stood in the doorway, looking like she'd rushed through a storm. Her uniform was disheveled, her breathing ragged, as if she'd hurried back. He'd never seen her like this. She was always so calm and composed, every button done up to the very top. But now her collar was open, and her eyes churned with an emotion he couldn't decipher. "Why didn't you say you were being discharged?" Ethan's voice was calm. "Why should I? You don't care if I live or die, do you?" She was momentarily speechless, her throat working as if something was caught in it. After a long moment, she said quietly, "You found out." But a moment later, she added, her voice hardening, "Samuel saved my life. I can't let anything happen to him." Ethan looked down and continued folding his clothes, his tone even, "Oh, you don't need to explain to me. That was your Auntie Vina. You can give it to whomever you want." She was struck silent again. The air congealed for a few seconds, then she noticed he was packing, and her eyes narrowed. She suddenly grabbed his wrist. "What are you doing?" Ethan, startled by her sudden action, frowned and pulled his hand away. He wanted to say sarcastically, "Can't you tell I'm packing?" But for some reason, he ended up saying mildly, "Just organizing my clothes. This dump you call a base. You have to air things out constantly or they get damp." Her tense shoulders seemed to relax slightly. Her tone reverted to its usual coolness. "This isn't your penthouse. I never said I wanted to live in a penthouse." He didn't look up, "And I won't be living in one anymore." She frowned, clearly not understanding his meaning. But a moment later, her expression turned cold again. "Are you planning to live on base for the rest of your life? I told you, don't cling to me. Get yourself straightened out and go back home as soon as possible." He couldn't be bothered to explain. He continued packing in silence. She stood nearby, quiet for a moment, then suddenly said, "I'm at my quarters tonight." He didn't reply. She repeated, her voice a little lower, "I mean, Samuel's recovered. I sent him home. Your injuries were more serious." "Fine. His injury wasn't that serious to begin with, and Captain Holloway has been taking care of him." As she changed his dressing, she chatted on about how well Rachel had been treating Samuel, personally feeding him water, staying up all night with him, even putting her military calls on hold. Ethan listened calmly, a strange lack of emotion in his heart. It was odd. He wasn't sad anymore. The venom is cleared. "You could be discharged after another day or two of observation," the doctor finally said. Ethan nodded. That same evening, he checked himself out of the hospital. Back at his barracks, he began to pack his things, clothes, his journal, the pocket watch his mother had left him. One by one they went into his suitcase. Halfway through packing, the door was suddenly thrown open. Ethan turned, stunned. Rachel Holloway stood in the doorway, looking like she'd rushed through a storm. Her uniform was disheveled, her breathing ragged as if she'd hurried back. He'd never seen her like this. She was always so calm and composed, every button done, up to the very top. But now her collar was open, and her eyes churned with an emotion he couldn't decipher. "Why didn't you say you were being discharged?" Ethan's voice was calm. "Why should I? You don't care if I live or die, do you?" She was momentarily speechless, her throat working as if something was caught in it. After a long moment, she said, quietly, "You found out." But a moment later, she added, her voice hardening, "Samuel saved my life. I can't let anything happen to him." Ethan looked down and continued folding his clothes, his tone even, "Oh, you don't need to explain to me. That was your Auntie Vina. You can give it to whomever you want." She was struck silent again. The air congealed for a few seconds, then she noticed he was packing, and her eyes narrowed. She suddenly grabbed his wrist. "What are you doing?" Ethan, startled by her sudden action, frowned and pulled his hand away. He wanted to say sarcastically, "Can't you tell I'm packing?" But for some reason, he ended up saying mildly, "Just organizing my clothes. This dump you call a base. You have to air things out constantly or they get damp." Her tense shoulders seemed to relax slightly. Her tone reverted to its usual coolness. "This isn't your penthouse. I never said I wanted to live in a penthouse." He didn't look up, "And I won't be living in one anymore." She frowned, clearly not understanding his meaning, but a moment later, her expression turned cold again. "Are you planning to live on base for the rest of your life? I told you, don't cling to me. Get yourself straightened out and go back home as soon as possible." He couldn't be bothered to explain. He continued packing in silence. She stood nearby, quiet for a moment, then suddenly said, "I'm at my quarters tonight." He didn't reply. She repeated, her voice a little lower, "I mean, Samuel's recovered. I sent him home. Your injuries were more serious. If it hurts tonight, call me to redress it." Ethan's movements paused, so she still remembered he was afraid of pain. She still remembered when they'd first met. He'd scraped his knee and cried from the pain. She'd scolded him with a cold face while gently applying ointment to his wound with her fingertip. "No need," Ethan snapped back to reality. his voice calm. I'm not afraid of pain anymore. He stuffed the last piece of clothing into a suitcase and looked up at her. If you have nothing else, you can leave. Weren't you the one who always talked about propriety between men and women? Aren't you afraid I'll deliberately try to provoke you again? Rachel's face turned frigid. She turned and slammed the door behind her. It wasn't until midnight that a piercing alarm shattered the stormy night. Ethan shot up in bed. Outside, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Rain hammered against the glass like a barrage of bullets. He just pulled open the curtains when he saw Rachel in a raincoat rushing outside. They collided in the hallway. The storm caused the river levee to collapse, and units were being deployed for disaster relief. Her brow was furrowed, rainwater dripping from her chin. Stay in your room, don't wander off. Before he could answer, she plunged into the downpour. Ethan stood by the window, watching the unit's trucks drive out of the main gate. Mrs. Henderson from the mess hall next door suddenly ran out, crying, "My grandson is still in the temporary housing by the river. What are we going to do?" Without a second thought, Ethan grabbed a raincoat and followed her. Half of the levee had already collapsed. Murky floodwaters carrying branches and debris surged downstream. Rachel was on high ground directing operations. Her uniform soaked. Her voice rang out. Team 1, evacuate civilians to the east. Team 2, reinforce the levee. Move. Suddenly, everyone's movements paused. All eyes turned in the same direction. Rachel followed their gaze. Ethan stood a short distance away, the downpour plastering his short hair to his pale cheeks. He was too striking, even in this chaotic scene. He was beautiful enough to draw every eye. Rachel strode over, took off her own raincoat, and wrapped it around him. "What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you to stay put? Arthur Miller sent me here. As long as I'm on this base, I'm one of your people." He looked up at her, rainwater dripping from his eyelashes. "Disaster relief. I should participate. You can't handle this kind of hardship." Her voice was firm. "Go back." But Ethan smiled. "Rachel Holloway, you've never understood me." With that, he waded directly into the knee-deep floodwaters and began helping to move civilians. Rachel tried to stop him, but Samuel's voice came from behind her. "Rachel." She turned to see Samuel holding a precarious umbrella. "What are you doing here?" Samuel paused, then spotted Ethan in the distance, his eyes instantly darkening. "I wanted to do my part too." Before Rachel could stop him, he followed Ethan into the water. The floodwaters rose. Ethan was carrying a crying child to higher ground when Samuel suddenly approached Ethan. "You've been coddled your whole life. You should go back. Give me the child." He reached out to take the child, who cried even harder in fright. Smack! Ethan slapped him across the face. "Samuel, people's lives are at stake right now, and you're still playing your games." Samuel clutched his face, his eyes venomous. After Ethan got the child to safety and turned to rescue others, he suddenly felt a strong push from behind. He plunged into the raging current, but at the last second, he grabbed Samuel's wrist, pulling him down to Ethan. "Samuel." Rachel's voice came from a distance, but the current was too strong. They were swept dozens of feet away in an instant. "Captain." Those two were about to be washed away. When Rachel reached them, she could only see two figures, bobbing in the flood. Samuel screamed desperately, "Rachel, save me." Ethan had already swallowed water, his face deathly pale, but he didn't make a sound. Another bolt of lightning struck, illuminating Rachel's resolute face. She leaped into the water, heading towards Samuel. In the final moment before the flood engulfed him, Ethan saw her choice. He suddenly felt so tired, so incredibly tired. So be it. He released his grip on the piece of driftwood and let the surging waters carry him away. Ethan vaguely felt someone wiping his face with a warm, damp cloth. "Captain Holloway, you haven't slept in 2 days. Let me watch over Mr. Miller." "No need." It was Rachel's voice, unbelievably hoarse. The person tried to insist, but someone else rushed in. "Captain Holloway, Dr. Evans has a fever again. He's calling your name." The figure beside his bed hesitated, then finally stood up. "Take good care of him." The sound of footsteps faded. When Ethan woke again, it was dusk outside. A young female soldier with a round face was watching over him. Seeing him open his eyes, she sighed in relief. "You're finally awake." His gaze unintentionally drifted towards the door. The soldier misunderstood. "Don't get the wrong idea. Even though Captain Holloway saved Dr. Evans first, she pulled you out soon after. She's been looking after you these past few days too. She only just went to Dr. Evans' side a little while ago. If you want to see her, I can go get her." "No need." Ethan's voice was dry. "I wanted to ask, have all the civilians been evacuated?" The soldier blinked. "All evacuated, thanks to your help." She scratched her head, embarrassed. "I used to think a rich kid like you couldn't handle hardship, but when things got serious, you really stepped up. You rescued the most people during this flood. The whole unit sees you in a new light now." She hesitated, then asked, her voice tinged with reluctance, "But are you going to finish your reform and go home soon?" "I am leaving," Ethan said, softly. "Not home though, to a small town to get married. After sending the soldier away, Ethan forced himself to get up and pack. The suitcase was almost full, but he couldn't find a photograph of him and his mother anywhere. Ethan, are you looking for this? Samuel was standing in the doorway, an old yellowed photograph dangling from his fingers. Get back! Ethan shot up, his vision blurring for a moment. Samuel took a couple of steps back, pulled a box of matches from his white coat pocket, and struck one. All right, here you go. The flame flared, licking at the edge of the photo. In that instant, Ethan's mind exploded. He lunged forward and slapped Samuel hard across the face. Smack! Samuel staggered and fell, the photo slipping from his hand. The flames had already reached his mother's face. Ethan dove to grab it, but Samuel raised his hand high. The photo burned completely to ash, scattering on the floor. Ethan's eyes were wide with fury. He grabbed Samuel's collar and slammed him to the ground. Ethan Miller. Rachel's voice exploded from the doorway. The next second, she yanked him off Samuel. Ethan stumbled and hit the corner of the table. She looked down at Samuel on the floor. He was clutching his face, his voice weak. Rachel, don't blame Ethan. It's my fault. I knew he didn't like me, but I was worried about him and secretly came to see him, and that's why he got angry. Apologize. She stared at Ethan, her voice like ice. Ethan stared fixedly at the pile of ashes, motionless. I said, apologize. I did nothing wrong. Ethan stared back at her, enunciating each word. He burned my mother's photograph. It's just a photograph. Her jaw tensed, anger simmering in her eyes. You think hitting someone is justified. Just a photograph. He laughed, his eyes burning. Rachel Holloway, do you have any idea that was the last thing my mother left me? She paused, taken aback. Before she could speak, Samuel tugged at her sleeve. Rachel, I didn't even if Ethan dislikes me that much, he shouldn't slander me like this. Rachel's frown deepened. Instantly, she issued a direct order. I thought during the flood relief you finally acted like a responsible man, but I see you're still incorrigible. Get outside and stand there. She pointed to the torrential rain pouring down in the courtyard. You can come back in when you're ready. To apologize, Samuel feigned to protest. Ethan's proud. He won't apologize to me. In this heavy rain, he'll get sick if he stands out there too long. If he won't apologize, he can stand there all day. Ethan suddenly laughed. No matter what, she always chose to believe Samuel. He turned and walked out without even grabbing a jacket, straight into the rain. Behind him, he heard Rachel and Samuel's voices. Are you hurting? Samuel asked softly. He heard her quick footsteps moving away. Rain lashed his face, mixing with tears, making it impossible to tell if it was cold or hot. The storm raged for an entire day and night. Ethan stood ramrod straight, rainwater streaming from his hair, his clothes long since soaked through. Mr. Ethan. A familiar voice called Mrs. Davidson rushed over with an umbrella. Seeing him in this state, tears immediately welled in her eyes. She tremblingly pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside was a thick stack of cash. Mr. Miller asked me to bring you $100,000. Mr. Ethan, please just go back and apologize to your father. That town in the middle of nowhere is no place for you, especially not to get married and spend the rest of your life there. Ethan shook his head. He'll be happier than anyone if I go. No matter how much I apologize, it won't change his decision. Mrs. Davidson's voice trembled, her tears splashing into the muddy water. She had come with his mother from her family home, had watched him grow up. Now, all she could do was uselessly tug at his sleeve. But you're his own flesh and blood. Ethan smiled faintly, his voice soft. The day he brought that woman and her son into the house, I lost my father. He's too busy playing dad to another man's son now. Mrs. Davidson cried harder. Ethan looked towards a corner of the wall. In the downpour, weeds were battered by the wind, swaying wildly, but they never bent completely. Don't worry, he said. I can survive anywhere, and I'll make sure my life is far better than theirs. Back in his room, he changed out of his drenched clothes and picked up the suitcase he'd already packed. As he walked out of the base's main gate, the young soldier on duty called out in surprise. Mr. Miller, are you going home? Ethan looked towards the distant gray mountains. There was a home there he'd never been to, a destination arranged by his father where he was to marry a simple country girl. Yeah, he nodded, his voice light. Going home. The young soldier blushed and scratched his head, both shy and reluctant. Well, won't you come back to visit? Old man Henderson from the Massel said he saved some smoked bacon for you. Ethan smiled brightly. Thanks, but I won't be back. Never again. With that, he turned and walked into the rain, striding away without a backward glance. A sudden premonition struck Rachel Holloway. She looked out the window. The rain was torrential, a dense curtain obscuring the view, making it impossible to see outside, let alone find Ethan. Rachel's gaze darkened. She stood up. Samuel grabbed her arm. Rachel, are you going to look for Ethan? In this downpour, he definitely won't last. He's probably just waiting for you to soften up. He smiled, innocently, which made Rachel frown. Don't talk about Ethan like that. He's not the type to shirk punishment. From his first day here, he's completed every single one. But today's rain is too heavy. If he stays out there any longer, something bad will happen. She couldn't help but worry about him. Seeing her expression, Samuel grew anxious, then stood up, well, hesitantly speaking, but Ethan's always been stubborn. If you go to him now, it'll only upset him more. Rachel, why don't we wait until his time is up? Rachel thought about Ethan's increasingly outrageous behavior recently. If she indulged him today, there was no telling what he'd do next. Her face hardened, and she sat back down. Samuel's face lit up, and he suddenly moved closer. The rain didn't stop until the next morning. Rachel immediately went downstairs to find Ethan, a bottle of cold medicine in her hand. But when she reached the designated punishment spot, the familiar figure was nowhere to be seen. Even the young soldier on guard duty said he hadn't seen Mr. Miller. Rachel's recently softened expression hardened again. Ethan actually dared to evade punishment. Samuel, seeing this, spoke with feigned regret. Honestly, Ethan, he won't even listen to you. Rachel, he's probably slacking off somewhere. Let's just ignore him and go get breakfast. Okay. Hearing this, the soldier on guard shook his head anxiously in rebuttal.